This is Kid.
And this is Drag.
And today we're going to talk about
all the stuff you think about.
Oh, yeah.
And today we're here to talk about some board gaming. Specifically in the St. Louis area, there is a wonderful community around board gaming, headed up a lot by our guest today, Jay McNamara. So, Jay, welcome to the show. I appreciate you spending some time with me today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So one part of my podcast is all about gaming, which we focus on video gaming, and it's a big deal. It's a big business and whatnot. But I think equally, when I look at the size of the audiences and communities gained around board gaming, you're just as large, if not larger, maybe not as well publicized, but there's a huge amount of people just in the St. Louis area. I've been just shocked to see how many people and how many social events are going on out there. So, Jay, with your knowledge and vast experience in the board gaming area, what brought you to board gaming and starting some of these communities that I see out there?
Well, I'm an old video gamer. I grew up on video games, and back when we would play Nintendo 64 or Super Nintendo, and you'd have your friends come over and everybody would play in the same room. And eventually, it moved into the more online gaming. So you're playing with people and you ended up sitting at your house by yourself and playing with all these people online. And it just it lost some of that face-to-face interaction that you got. And so that's when I started getting into, I kind of fell into the board games. Like I've always played like Risk and some of that kind of stuff, but I've always wanted more, but just didn't know where to look or what to find. And eventually somebody introduced me to the game Dominion is what got me into it originally. And we started playing it. I started getting friends together, and then it was that, getting together and playing a game face to face again, a little bit of trash talking, that kind of thing. And it just kind of made it more social. And it just, it kind of brought that face to face thing back. And that's where I fell in love with it. And I fell through the rabbit hole, if you will, and started discovering all these other games and all these other game groups around town, and just kind of immersed myself in it.
Yeah, I can definitely see the outcome. Like looking at your Facebook group, there's almost 750 members, and that's tremendous. Just a huge amount of people showing interest. And I know I work a co-event with you in the once a year annual Extra Life fundraising that I know you have quite a few people, nearing like 50 people down there, where the video gamers brought in about the same last year. But it's a really good, passionate group, definitely dedicated. That's awesome to see you guys partnering with our group here and your group and really doing something special. So when you're looking at your favorite games, which ones really sink in your time that you can't walk away from when somebody sends in like, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to put in a good day and a half into this game. What is that one that really stands out to you?
I play all different kinds of games, but what really hooks me in are like the heavier strategy games that, it takes that time or two to play it. And then you eventually it clicks and you're like, oh, wow, okay. And then you start discovering all these different strategies, and it kind of makes your brain think in a whole different way. Most recently, a new game that just came out is called Pipeline. And that's one that's, it's fairly easy to explain to somebody, but when you start getting into the depth of it and figuring out, it's a game that's all about buying crude oil and refining it and selling it. And to do that, you have to build a pipe network. Think about like some of those old games like Pipe Dream or some of those old video games where you're building a pipe network out and you're using it to push oil through and refine it. And it's one of those games that like the first time you play, you're super frustrated because you just can't figure out, what to do, to become successful. And then by the end of the game, you start talking about it, it starts to make sense. And then that second time you play through, it kind of clicks. And then it's like one of those games, it's just like, I want to solve this puzzle. I want to figure it out. And it keeps pulling you back.
Right. There was a game that our group with the DEF CON 1 team with Matt and Scott, we started playing called Eco, and it turned into something like that because, you go look at the advertising and it's really geared towards an educational game. That I know it was funded by the White House and got some extra bonus money from the education system. It was that way that we got, knee deep in. I don't even want to talk about how many hours we have into this. And we go, oh man, we should have done this, this, this. And it's like a life of regret after the first playthrough. It sounds a lot,
Oh yeah.
sounds a lot like that. So that's pretty awesome. I'll definitely have to check that one out. Going into like, there's a lot of commentary about games where you have a game master. So how important is that role in your group or group when you're setting up, even if it's a temporary or long-term one? What does that play into how you guys are able to be successful and have a really good event?
So as a game master, are you talking about somebody who like set up and teach the games to people and kind
Right.
of? Well, with our group, I mean, we're pretty lucky. We got a lot of people in our group that usually, that kind of person is the one who's going to be going out and buying the games and learning the games and like teaching them to everybody. And it's interesting because there's a lot of those in our group. So we like when you come to some of our like meetups and stuff, everybody brings like a big giant bag of games, and we just have all kinds of games to play. So I do it quite a bit, but I mean, there's a lot of other people who do it as well.
Sure. Oh, that sounds awesome. So what did it take? I know a lot in social media. I think they talk about it more, but you're doing live social media and growing this huge following of people that are agreeing to put aside a lot of time. It's usually not a 5 minute meetup, right? It's usually a pretty extensive time you're spending. How did you grow into that and start to get to discover those people who are interested in that? And as you've grown this community more close together, how did that all develop for you?
Well, I mean, we St. Louis has a great board game community to begin with, and I
Mhm.
just kind of like fell into it. And I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that I can get into if you want me to. But generally, the first time I really branched out and started meeting people to play these more complex games, because eventually, as I'm getting more and more into it, the people that I'm playing with, they reach a kind of a point where it starts to get too much for them. Like, the games get too complex, or they don't want to learn new games all the time. So that's when I branched out to meetup.com, and I originally found the St. Louis board game meetup group, which is even bigger than ours. And they've got a lot of great people, and they run events too every week. And that's where I started. I met a lot of really great people through there. But I also have a love for craft beer, and I like doing my meetups generally in breweries. So that's where I kind of branched out a little bit. I
Right.
just started doing a game night here and there in breweries, and it kind of became bigger and bigger. So I go to the other ones
Mhm.
sometimes. Some of those guys come to mind. We kind of intermingle.
First setup, what does your priority look like? You've got your crew put together through your contacts and said, "Hey, I've got this." What's your preparation look like, and how long are you generally spending on a game night, if you will?
Well, our main game nights are on Friday nights,
Hmm.
and the meetup will officially start at 6 o'clock. But generally, I'll get there about 4 o'clock, and usually some other people show up early for an early game. And I mean, just depending on what happens, we'll start off maybe with a light game or two, and then get into some heavier ones once everybody shows up. And generally, people start filing out somewhere around 10 o'clock, maybe 9 to 10, somewhere around there. And we usually game like up to like midnight. 12:30, I think, is our cutoff time for our room that we have on Friday night. So we generally we'll do an 8 hour game night usually every week.
No, that's pretty awesome.
I do Wednesday nights also, but those typically are a little earlier, like maybe 9 or 10. Those start winding down.
Right. So when you're looking, I know with when we do the commingled event and we've got the PC gamers and the board gamers in there. I know some of the PC gamers will jump into some games, but I personally walk in and go, that looks so complicated. I don't think I can touch that. And it's somewhat intimidating when you get into the higher level games. How does someone go about getting started and, not be overwhelmed with some of the complexities that go on in the games?
You just have to be willing to jump in there and try it out. I mean, you really, I think what people get hung up on is trying to win games right away. And I think you just kind of have to come in with that mentality like, I'm just going to go with the flow. I'm going to see what's going on. And by the end of the game, if you learn it, that's a success. And then you can try it again on the next time. We have new people come in all the time and we teach new games too. I'm super patient with everybody. I'll explain the rules to them. I'll help them out throughout the game. I know that it can be intimidating for some people, and I think you just kind of have to be willing to just jump in there and give it a try. And it's not for everybody, but if you but you have to be able to just jump in and just kind of go with the flow and like figure out, okay, how do I do this? What can I do? And then once you kind of lock that down and start doing things in the game, like taking actions and doing stuff, then it all kind of starts to come together. And I think more often than not, the games look way more complicated than they actually are. Don't get me wrong, some of them are that complicated, but not all of them are. And I'll usually start people off small. Like if somebody comes in and they're brand new and they come in and I ask them what games they played and they say Monopoly or Risk, I'm not going to throw them into a super complicated game right away.
Right.
We can work up to it. I've got games of every complexity level, and there's fun games of all types. So there's definitely something for pretty much everybody, I think.
Sure. And I think that's a lot of the points made about this in this Amazon movie documentary that they've got out there right now is don't be intimidated, but there is a little bit of saltiness out there. There are some people that they'll create a game invite and put the notes out like, don't bother coming unless you've played this for years, right? There are some elitist type groups out there that really want to play a high level game, and I can respect that too. But for you and the group that you work with and game with, what drives you and that group more? Is it more developing other people into the thing, or do you really like the super complex where it's a very elite game?
I mean, it goes both ways. I mean, there's some times where I want to dig deep into a game and I prefer to play it with people that already know the rules. But with but for the most part, I just like hanging out with people, and I like sharing that experience with people at the table. And I'm pretty much just more out to have a good time than I am to really kind of get deep into something. So generally, I'm open to play with anybody at any time, and if they want to play something a little lighter, I'm willing to do that. Or if they're willing to try something heavier, even if they're brand new and never played it, I'll sit down and explain it to them and help them through it. I kind of enjoy that part of it as well. So uh, our group is pretty open about that. We usually welcome new people in pretty openly, but I know it's an intimidating thing to jump into for some people. I've had people show up and kind of like hover around the edge, and I try to invite them in, and they're like, I don't know, and then some people are willing just to jump in and jump into something heavy right away. So it just all depends on the person.
No, I can definitely understand that. There's I think that's the case with a lot of things. I think if you're afraid of something, it's really hard to get into. But having a good open group who's not super judgmental and that type of thing is really good. So I'm glad to hear that, because at the heart of it, I think a lot of the similar things drive any type of gamer, that you're usually trying to socialize. It's a social platform as much as it is anything. And when we're gaming, we're not out dealing with some of the very negative things in society, right? And
Right.
it's also when you look at the cost, if you're sitting at home, married, single, with kids, without kids, and you start to look at what it costs to go do things, right? You can spend a small fortune taking your family out to dinner and a movie, and that lasts for 3 hours, and you get 8 hours of excitement out of a board game and more community. So I have mad props for that. I feel the same way about video games. When I'm in that mode, it's time to turn off the real world, go settle down. Not necessarily mindless activity. I want challenging activity, but I also want it where it's not dealing with the normal work life or social pressures or whatever like this. It's kind of a little bit of escape, but no more so than a movie, no more so than going to see a play. Um, how does your feelings about like the society and the people that you're playing with? I know they're close and I'm sure they're very good friends and whatnot, but as far as social commentary, what type of person do you see generally in the gaming world? As far as friendliness, what's that demographic that really does really populates the gaming world that you are associating with?
Most of the people that out to our meetups and that I game with are super friendly, and I've never seen any kind of issues at all with anybody, any kind of arguments or anything. They've been very, very rare. Uh, I mean, that being said, the gaming community can have some people that are a little bit socially awkward, but we're super friendly with people, and we accept anybody and everybody who wants to come game with us. And we have been pretty happy. We haven't had any problems. There's nothing I've had to deal with anyway, as far as like people getting upset or whatever.
That's kind of the point, and what I take away when I'm talking to people who are in that world and they do that. I rarely find somebody who I wouldn't want to hang around and I wouldn't want my kids around or I wouldn't want my family around. Most of the time when I'm dealing with board gamers, and I know they do that a lot, they're really awesome folks. They're super friendly. And as you say, I think every arena has people that are socially awkward, and that is what it is. But for the most part, it's a very open community, open and welcoming community, and I think that's pretty cool where you see, you start thinking about these other activities like, oh, I play softball or whatnot, which is ultra competitive and that's fun. I do some of that stuff too. But it does get to be where I think the enjoyment of the activity gets lessened, where I see it is heightened with the gaming community. So I'm really excited to see as the popularity of video gamers, board gamers starts waxing and it becomes more and more a part of our life. We've got a lot of people that are proud to say, oh, yeah, I spend all of my weekend video gaming. I spend all of my weekend board gaming. I think it's an interesting and very exciting time to see in our society. I'm glad to see it because one, they're not out robbing things. Two, they're not out causing trouble. They're usually instilling some pretty good structure and critical thought into their lives, and I think it's all just such a positive thing on our society that I love to see that.
I will say that while at the game groups everybody's pretty calm and we just want to have a good time and people don't get super competitive. I'm an engineer, and at lunch I do lunchtime with a group of engineers, and we play games at lunch, and it gets cutthroat. That's where it gets competitive between those guys. Like but at the end of the day, we're all having a good time too. But during that game, it's cutthroat. It's anything goes.
I think that's a good statement on society where you can be that competitive and still walk away very friendly and wanting to do it again. I think that says a lot.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to live without a little bit of competition out there? That's I'll watch my wife frequently start to play video games, board games, or anything like that, and she's just as meek and mild and kind and friendly as anything right up until that moment. And she goes, what is going on? And you can just see, you can see the passion gets involved there, even in the most calm of people in the right situation. So that's definitely understandable. So Jay, if you were to say, hey, there's going to be a bunch of people listening, what would you have as wisdom to get into board gaming? How do you go get involved in those communities? What's your biggest advice that you would like a lot of people to hear to bring more people to board gaming?
I mean, the best thing you can do, at least for anybody in the St. Louis area, but I mean, this probably goes for any area out there, is check meetup.com for groups in your area that play games, or there's Facebook groups. Here in St. Louis, you got the St. Louis Area Board Gamers Facebook group. Usually you can see all the events that are going around town in that group. Also on meetup.com, we have St. Louis Gamers, which I post all of my meetups on that. And then there's also, like I said before, the St. Louis Board Game Meetup group has a lot of events too. So I think, once you find the events, you can't be afraid to just jump in there and introduce yourself and meet some people. Because I know that's a barrier for some people too that just aren't as outgoing as some. It's hard to kind of insert yourself in a group of people that you don't know when they all know each other. It seems like. So, but in my experience, we're super friendly. We love meeting new people. We love bringing people in and just showing them how awesome the board game community and how much fun it can be. So it's just finding those events and just go out and introduce yourself and just jump in and go in with no expectations. Don't try to win right away. Just get in there and try to learn some of the games and just dive right into it. And that's probably the best way to do it.
Oh, that is fantastic advice. I think that's well said, well spoken. I would say with the group and folks that I have met in your group and other board gaming groups, they have been very open and welcoming to talk about it, and they're excited to teach. 99% of everybody I meet is super excited to come teach you, hey, let me show you this game, because they want people to play with too. So last point, have you been down to, and are you excited about the Up Down Bar opening in St. Louis last week?
I am. I'm looking forward to checking it out, but I'm going to give it a little time to die down a little bit.
that was the first comment that I heard, that it was so busy. I mean, I just for the first time went to the Two Plumbers Bar like 3 weeks ago, maybe, up in St. Charles, which was pretty cool. It wasn't too bad, but it looked very couple centric. I felt awkward that I went in there with another guy that was a friend, and everybody in there was a couple, so it was a little awkward.
Yeah.
But the Up Down Bar definitely looked exciting. I didn't make it down on opening night. I promised I would. Then I thought, I'm not willing to deal with that level of crazy just yet.
No, it's an arcade bar is never fun when it's super crowded and you have to wait to get into something. So I'm going to let that die off a little bit. But have you also heard of the Pieces, the board game cafe down in Soulard?
So I did. Matt told me about that maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. He mentioned that and said that he enjoys going down there when it's board game time, but I have not been down there yet. I haven't been introduced yet, but I hear good things.
That place is fantastic too. All the people that work down there and run the place are amazing.
Well, that's fantastic. So with that, hey, I appreciate the conversation today. I appreciate all the insight into the board gamer, specifically around St. Louis. I know everybody I have shaken hands with or met, whether it be the Extra Life event or other people out in the world that are involved, have been fantastic and had nothing but good things to say about you. I appreciate your time coming on and giving us a little education, a little insight into the board gaming world. So again, thank you, Jay. If you want to play board games, hit him up on his Facebook area for St. Louis board gamers. There's a lot of folks out there. It looks like a lot of people are meeting up tonight too. It looks like a lot of nights there's a lot of meetups going on.
Oh yeah, there's multiple. There's 2 different meetups going on tonight. There's stuff in St. Louis. You can play board games every single night of the week if you want to.
No, that's fantastic, man. Well, I appreciate all the efforts you're doing for the betterment of the St. Louis gaming community. It sure is appreciated by me and a lot of other people out there. So again, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for giving me some good insight into not just St. Louis, but board gaming and what drives people in general. And love to have you on again in the future. And for now, I'm going to let you guys get back after it. I appreciate you and thank you again.
And that's our episode today, folks. Signing out for now. This is Drag.
And this is Kid. We'll catch you next time.